Alright, I tried to make it by 7. I think I'm close. Yeah, 7 to 1. Okay. So tonight, I was asked to come on and go live to talk to you guys a little bit about what research says about dyslexia. So I know that a lot of people following our Kentucky Reads page are teachers, and that's what I am. I taught special education for, I guess about 10 years. I taught special ed for 7 years before I knew what dyslexia was, and I had a student who qualified with dyslexia, and when my director of special ed asked me if I knew what dyslexia was, I wasn't able to tell her. So as I was working on my PhD, my professor asked if I was interested in studying about dyslexia, and I thought it was perfect because I would like to know more information about it as well. So she gave me this awesome book, Overcoming Dyslexia, which it looks like it's backwards on your end, but it's by Sally Shaywitz, and it's kind of like the Bible in the dyslexia world. She has so much research and just information. So this is a great book to start with if you're looking for information. But when I started reading about what dyslexia was, I was just amazed because I had taught for so long, and I had taught students that had learning disabilities in reading and never understood truly what that disability was. So now that we do know, the research tells us that almost 80% of students that have a specific learning disability in reading have dyslexia. So most students who have an IEP for SLD reading are dyslexic. And that's huge because in order to reach those students with dyslexia, we need to make sure we're using the right interventions. So anyways, let me tell you a little bit about the basics of what research says about dyslexia. So I have my little brain here, and I'm going to try to show you a little about what that is. So dyslexia, the main thing is that it's a neurological difference. And what a lot of people have been using are these fMRI machines that they put people through and they watch them read. They might ask them to do these two words rhyme, or there's lots of different probes that they give, and they watch how the brain waves light up. And what they've been able to see is that some students with dyslexia, they have this brain, the neurological pathway is totally different. So an average reader, when you read, the neurons go right to the left side of the brain, it analyzes it, you read it, and you read fluently. A lot of students with dyslexia, the neurological pathways travel from the right side over to the left side and then back out through the right side. So the right side, some research says the right side is even bigger for students with dyslexia or people with dyslexia, which we sometimes think is true because a lot of people with dyslexia are very creative. And creativity comes from the right side of the brain. So because those neurological pathways are taking the extended path, this right side of the brain is being used more, and it hopefully can help a lot of them be more creative, think outside of the box, figure out what they're reading without being able to read it, things like that. The other thing that research shows, and this is the biggest difference between dyslexia and your average reader, is that on the left side of the brain, there's 3 little sections that are used to analyze what you're reading. So I'm going to kind of describe it like this. The first little area will sound out the letters. So it'll say b, a, t. The second area kind of glues those together, and it says, oh, bat. The third area associates those 3 letters with some sort of picture or memory or whatever it is that allows you to remember what that word is. Students with dyslexia don't have all of those areas working together. Sometimes only the front little area is working. Sometimes the front area works and a little bit of the second area works, but not the third area. So some of us teachers who give reading probes or nonsense word fluency tests, the student will read, let's say, they'll say, at, take. And you're like, that's not it. And then they'll go to the next one and they'll say, at, tell. And they'll just guess because all they remember is they remember getting the letters around and they were able to sound the 3 letters out using the front part of the area of the brain, but they never glued the letters together. And they remembered one of the letters that they read, and so they took a good guess. And so as teachers, I was always perplexed because I was like, well, he's sounding it out. Why can't he say what the word is? Well, neurologically, he was never able to glue those phonemes together to create a word. So in teaching of reading, we need to work on true phonics to the fullest extent. So a lot of times we stop at a B says ba. What we need to do is teach how to manipulate phonemes. So can you say bat without the b? And then you keep going. Can you say clap without the ul? Can you say take but take off the k and add a p. And what would that say? And then you can go all the way to the end of the spectrum, and you can do something like, this is my favorite example, but can you say funny using the phonemes of funny? Say it backwards. What would funny say backwards using the phonemes? So it would be f, n, e. Then you would say it backwards. So think about it. The word is enough. So funny backwards is enough when you look at just the phonemes. And those skills are all about manipulating the phonemes. Think about like playing with Play-Doh. You kind of put them all in, you play with them, you pull them back out, and you say it. Let's put it all back in, let's play with them, let's pull it back out, let's say it. Being able to manipulate the phonemes is going to help all three of these areas work together. Because while they might be able to sound them out, they're not gluing them together, and they certainly aren't associating them with anything that's going to help them remember it. So that's the biggest chunk, I would have to say, about what research shows is the difference between a dyslexic brain and a student who's just struggling to read. Somebody who's truly dyslexic does not have all of the areas working together that they need to be a fluent reader. Students who are struggling with reading have those three areas that are working, they just need more instruction. So, as we know, multisensory structured language or structured literacy can help students with dyslexia because it helps change the neurological pathways. So our joke in our little dyslexia world is we're kind of like brain surgeons because we're changing the neurological pathways. So, that's what I always say. We should get paid like brain surgeons. But truly, if we're using the right interventions, you can change the neurological pathway. So instead of going all the way around, it can start taking shortcuts. And then once it starts taking the shortcuts, it can start lighting up all of the areas through all the different interventions. It's very structured, it's very explicit, it's very direct. And those students are learning skills that they need to learn to begin to allow all the areas of the brain to work together. So that's the biggest takeaway that I would want you guys to get about the difference what research says is dyslexia versus a struggling reader. Some other cool facts are that dyslexia is highly genetic, and they've done a lot of research on that. Recently I went to Orlando to the International Dyslexia Association conference, and our keynote speaker, I think his name was Galiberta, he was amazing. He's like this, truly, he studies brains, and he's doing this study on mice, which is interesting, but it's called like the knockout mice, and he had this image of the mouse wearing like boxing gear, and what they're doing is they're trying to block out genes and see, monitor their hearing, their ability to listen, auditory listening, and it's just fascinating. The point is that they're trying to work with the genetic makeup to see what gene is actually affected by it. We do know that dyslexia is highly genetic. We don't necessarily know which particular gene, but there's lots of research out there going on to try to figure that out. Another huge thing that I think is important for us as teachers to know is that dyslexia is often comorbid with other disabilities, which that means is like there's two disabilities at once. So it's often associated with students with ADHD, and we think it's almost a 30% overlap. So it's hard because sometimes when we're watching our students who are busy, we don't know if they're busy because they're trying to avoid reading, or if they're not reading because they're too busy to learn. And I've been in lots of meetings where we get to the end of it and we look at all the data and we're just not sure. Is his behavior causing him not to read, or is his reading causing these behaviors? And it's what do we do here? I don't know. But sometimes almost 30 to 40% have both. So maybe it's possible that the student could have both, and so we shouldn't hold back interventions or hold back services because of blame, because we think it's a different disability, if you understand what I'm saying there. Because research does show that it can happen together, and oftentimes, not often, but 30 to 40% of the time, it does happen together. So that's another thing that is huge about research. And on the flip side, some students, and I don't know exactly the percentage, but there's a good amount of students who can be twice exceptional, which means they struggle with reading, but they're gifted in other areas. And I worked with a 4th grader who was not formally diagnosed with dyslexia, but like I said, 80% of those students who have SLD reading have dyslexia. And so this was a student who I had with a specific learning disability in reading, and he was super, super smart. He was in the AP classes for math. He was a whiz, and the poor child just had really, really struggled with reading, which makes it difficult for teachers because, especially in the content areas that require more reading, science, social studies, even math, of course, requires reading, but sometimes their lack of reading can hold back their growth academically. So it's just really important to know that just because they can't read doesn't mean that they're not brilliant. They can have a high IQ and just not be able to read yet because they haven't learned all of those skills that they need to be able to attack those words. So that's another thing to watch out for. If you have a student with SLD reading, don't just think that he needs to be in the low track. Really, truly monitor where he is academically if you can. Do the oral test. Are his thoughts outstanding and he's just not being able to write it down? Things like that. And try to be flexible with the way that you group the students. Maybe try them in an AP class and see what happens. You know, it does happen that students with dyslexia are twice exceptional, and it's not rare. And I've seen it, I've truly seen it, and I've seen a great example. That school that I was teaching at had him in an AP math class, and then I would come in reading and do his interventions in reading. And it was really nice to see that we appreciated his whole self as a student. So, and I think, those are the main points I wanted to hit on. I don't want to spend too long on this live feed. So I want to show you this. This is another book that's a quick and easy book. So it's called Basic Facts About Dyslexia, and it's published through the International Dyslexia Association. So it's another good reference, especially if you're a teacher and you want to just get a quick facts, or if you want to share it with parents. It's just a real little one, whereas this Overcoming Dyslexia is a little bigger. But this is a great book. This has got a ton of research in it. This one has a summary of all of the research. So anyways, let me see if there was anything that you guys had comments on. Sorry, I'm not like a pro at this going live. Okay, so yes, Rosanna, it sounds like your child. And it's true. And I wish that more people would take time to look at the child first and look at the strengths and see what they can do. A lot of times it's hard as a special education teacher because students are taking a test in science or science or social studies or a content area, and they fail, they bomb the test, and you're like, but you knew it, you were prepared, we studied for it, what happened? Well, you go and you look at the test, and they didn't have a reader or they didn't have a scribe, and a lot of students who have specific learning disability in reading don't get a scribe, they don't get somebody to write for them. But because they can't read well, they don't have the word attack skills, sometimes they don't know the sounds that create words, and it does inhibit their writing. So you get to the open response, and it's like this really short, it is cool, or it was old, you know. And then if you asked them about it, they had this whole long story to tell you. But if they had to write it down, it was the most simple answer because they didn't want to take the time to figure out how to spell it or just think through the thoughts on paper. So as a teacher, sometimes if you think the student knows it and they're just not performing it on that written test, try it orally, even if it's not their accommodation, because what you're wanting to do is find out, do they know the content or can they write? You know what I mean? And I know a lot of us teachers know that that's best practice, and sometimes it's hard because we have 25, 30 students in the class, and so how can I pull 15 of them back to ask them that? But you can. If you're creative, or maybe you ask for some supports or, whatever that might be. But always look and try orally if you think that the student truly does know the information and it's the reading that's holding them back or it's the writing that might be holding them back. So anyways, those are just some tips. So I think that's good. Yeah, I agree. The twice exceptional kids are very often overlooked. And there's research coming out about that. Hopefully, I think one of the biggest things about dyslexia, and I'm going to take longer than I should. I'm at 15 minutes. Sorry about that. My last quick comment. The hardest part about dyslexia is that we don't have like a standard-based assessment yet. So there's not, a score. Oh, your student is got a 45, and so they're mildly dyslexic, and blah, 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 blah. There's not. There's more of a profile, strengths and weaknesses. What are they struggling with? And I think that's the hardest part, because if we had some test, let's say like autism, there's a score. It's cut and dry. You either fall on the spectrum or you don't fall on the spectrum. Because dyslexia doesn't have that yet, I think we have a really hard time with that. So when we look at twice exceptional, it's hard because, I don't know, it really is, because they're gifted in areas and they struggle with reading, and when they have to take the test to see if they're in the AP classes or if they're gifted classes, they have to read them. So sometimes they don't do well on the test because they're not reading it. So it's a complex situation. But anyways, okay, I'm going to get off because that was longer than I planned it to be. I wanted to try to make it 10 minutes. But anyways, we will give you more research. We'll give you more information. We'll give you strategies for the classroom. Whatever you need from us, this is what we're here for. We are a group created for teachers to help teachers. So if you have teachers that you think would benefit from the information, tell them to like our page or hop on our website, or we're on Twitter, we're on YouTube because we're going to post these videos on YouTube to put them on Twitter. So anyways, we're trying to get it all worked out. We're not the best, we're not social media geniuses, or I'm not at least, but we're here for you guys. So if there's things in particular that you want, or if there's teachers you know that would benefit, send them our way. All right, thanks. Have a good night, guys. Now I got to figure out how to finish this thing. See ya.